question of who owns the data is an interesting and important one. In the field I work in political science, and most social science fields, since the kind of data we work with tend not to have a market value to it, the issue of the university ownership is less central than the possession of the data by the principal investigator and whatever research institute he's affiliated with, and the extent to which he makes the data available to collaborators, to other researchers, and so forth. The funded research at universities has to be research that eventually becomes public. Universities don't do, at least in the social sciences, proprietary type research. At least that's been my experience here at Columbia. So at some point the data have to be made public. As to when that occurs, there's no fixed answer to it. Obviously, it should occur once the principal investigator has made the use of it that he or she wants to make of it. The knotty issue that comes up is at what point the data might be shared by a researcher with his students or postdoctoral fellows or other researchers at the university before the researcher has gotten his or her full set of publications from it. And there, different researchers have different personal policies and styles. Some researchers are more generous than others. What may make a difference sometimes is whether the researcher is tenured or untenured. A tenured researcher can afford to be more generous in sharing and so forth. But with regard to sharing more broadly, once the PI is done with the data ought to be made public for other research purposes. With regard to the challenges that researchers face in dealing with data on human subjects, a lot depends on the nature and sensitivity of the data, although in principle all data on human subjects have to deal with the same national and state and university guidelines that are in place. I mean, the key things there are for the researcher to ask right from the start why there is a need in this particular case to protect the information about human subjects. For some kinds of data, like public opinion polls of the sort that I use, there usually aren't ways of identifying the respondents in the survey once the name of the respondent or locational information's been deleted. Although even there might be circumstances. You might have a survey where you have a Native American respondent who lives in Vermont, and given the population of Vermont, there might be ways of identifying that person based on other questions that are asked in the survey. But the key is to ask, what are the red flags and dangers involved, and that will alert the researcher to how serious the problems are. Although in principle, any breach of anonymity and confidentiality is crucial. For other kinds of research, especially when you're sending students out into the field, where the professor or the principal investigator might not have more direct control on what the student does, it's important for the student to be aware of the need to safeguard information about the respondent. And also in the course of collecting data, there might be dangers involved or possible risks involved in the way the data are collected. Even in social science, when you're collecting data by simply asking people questions, the questions need to be phrased in a way that don't adversely affect the respondent. There might be questions that are sensitive or use words that might offend the person and cause some kind of mild psychological distress. But even those kinds of things are things you want to avoid.